Okay, welcome. It's really great to see all of you. Thank you for being here. It's funny, I was afraid that because we broadcast this later and make it available on YouTube, that we wouldn't have much of a crowd today. Clearly, I was wrong about that. So it's just wonderful to see all of you. I hope you're well, staying well. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope you're making plans for a great holiday season as well. So obviously, we're here today to talk about monthly service fee increases for 2024. First thing I want to do is just remind everyone this meeting is for independent living residents. It's fine for anybody else to attend, but we will only be talking about independent living monthly service fees and second occupant charges. So I can tell you that we will not, so the result of this meeting is tomorrow we will send out letters to all of our residents in independent living indicating the amount of their increase and the amount of their new rent. So expect those sometime tomorrow, maybe on Saturday, depends upon when you check your mailbox. That is so that we can make those changes effective January the 1st. Monthly service fee rates for assisted living, memory care, our care fees in assisted living and memory care, as well as our charges in the health center will not be changing January 1st. We are going to take a look in December, kind of where we stand on those, and make decisions that will likely go into effect February the 1st. It's what we did last year. The same is true for all of the ancillary type fees. That includes parking. So we don't yet know if we're going to be changing parking, and if we are, we don't know how much. But all kinds of little other fees that are a part of life here, you'll be notified of those 30 days before they change. So they'll likely change February 1st, and we'll get notification out to you in December. Okay, let's do some quick introductions. Hopefully all of you know by now, I'm Reggie Mullis. I have been the Chief Executive Officer here at the Hearthstone for just over 2 years. With me on the stage is Peter Schultz. If you hadn't had a chance to meet Peter, Peter is our accounting manager. I made a comment in a resident assembly once that I see Peter as eventually being our next chief financial officer. So we've planted a seed and we're watering it, and we hope he grows into that role. Jack McKittrick remains to be our chief financial officer. And Hallie, you can turn that last slide off. Jack, as many of you know, works from a home base in St. Louis, Missouri, and he was not able to schedule to be here this week. He'll be in next week. We are wrapping up our budgeting process, and what you will hear today is a significant amount of the work we had to do to figure out what our budgets are going to look like for next year. So last year we developed a theme as we met with you to talk about rate increases, and I just wanted to remind you and share that with you again. The idea is that as a management team, the leadership here, our board of trustees, and all of you, I think we can agree on a common goal, which is to ensure the long-term sustainability of the Hearthstone. I've indicated that was my primary message from the day I got here. The Hearthstone is over 60 years old. I would like to know that 60 years from now, the Hearthstone is still alive and well, and that the time that I was here helped in some way be instrumental in ensuring that long life. So we're all in this together, and we're doing everything we can to ensure the Hearthstone's long-term success. So I want to talk for a second about the process we used last year versus what we're doing this year. So last year, if you recall, if you were here, we used what is known as a market variance approach or a market rate approach. And essentially, we take a look at what each resident was paying at the time versus what that apartment was worth, what we would resell it for in terms of a monthly service fee. This was an analysis we did based on our comparison to our competitors. We call it a competitive analysis. Jill and I made lots of calls, pulled a lot of research, talked to other communities, and we established our rates for new incoming residents. Those rates have been in place now for over a year. They are holding. We don't see any indication that those rates are higher than they should be in the marketplace. Once we had that information, then we were able to compare it to what folks were paying. And that's when we determined that the variance, the difference in what people were paying and what the value was of those apartments was significant. If you recall, on average, between all three buildings, the variance was about 25%. However, within that, some people were below market, meaning they were paying less than what that room would sell for by as much as 40%, 40. Big gaps. So last year we did a 3-tiered rate increase. Some folks got a 5% increase, some folks got a 7.5% increase, and some folks got a 10% increase. And while I apologize that I know a 10% increase is difficult and scary, the reality was we were trying to build a little more equity into the process. Our efforts to do that, though, were not well received. I think there was considerable misunderstanding, some confusion, and clearly some dissatisfaction that we heard about, particularly from those that got 10% rate increases. So to take that off the table, this year we have elected to do what the Hearthstone has traditionally do, which is a flat rate increase. So all independent living residents will receive the same amount of increase. One second. And sorry, the last slide is where the increase is, so you'll have to bear with me for a minute. I need to give you one caveat too, that during my tenure here, and this is the third time we've made adjustments to rates since I've been here, we have not increased the monthly service fee for any resident that had moved in within the previous year. It feels a little aggressive to move somebody in and in a short amount of time say, oh, by the way, your rent's going up. So we don't do that. So that's if somebody says, well, I didn't get an increase. We are, however, sending letters to those residents so they know that not to expect an increase. So again, this is a little bit of a review from last year, and we're talking about financial stability. That goes to long-term sustainability, is you first have to get your house in order and get the scale balanced. Remember, we're a not-for-profit, so we're not trying to find a way to be profitable. We're trying to get to an even balance between the revenue that we take in, which comes from all of you and residents and families that support those residents in assisted living, memory care, and the health center. So those are essentially all of the ways in which we earn revenue as an organization. So financial stability comes from essentially balancing revenues and expenses. I don't think it's a surprise to any of you, and we said this last year, our expenses here at the Hearthstone have been growing incredibly fast over the last few years. Even before I got here, we were seeing through COVID, supply chain issues, the expenses associated with COVID, labor costs soaring. We've seen expenses go up over and over again. And part of my job here today, and with Peter's help, is we want to dig into that a little bit and share as much as we can with you all about what those expenses are and what kinds of changes we're seeing. But suffice it to say, they've clearly been going up for years. This year is exceptional in that regard. But I want to assure you that at the same time, our board and our administration here, our leadership, we're working hard to look at ways where we can reduce expenses and control the expenses we have. The challenge, as I talked about last year, is if I reduce the cost associated with something, there's a good chance many of you will feel that. And the Hearthstone has a reputation of providing high quality services and maybe there were some periods of time that wasn't true, but today we feel like we're making as much effort as we can to provide high quality services. And they're expensive. Everything from labor to food to utilities and spaces, everything we do has a cost to it. So I don't want anybody to worry that we're going to cut back on services. I need you to understand and appreciate the fact that it's difficult to cut expenses without residents feeling that, okay? But we remain committed to, with this next budget, we plan to make some adjustments that we think will help us next year. So, like last year, we have a resource that comes from a company called Ziegler Capital. They're a financial organization that supports communities like ours. They arrange financing. In fact, the two Cove buildings, the debt service we have there, which is bond financing, they were instrumental in putting all of that together for the Hearthstone long before I got here. So they do an annual survey to about 250 chief financial officers like Jack. And they ask questions. You know, one of the key questions that we'll see toward the end of the presentation is, how much are you planning to increase your monthly service charges? But the other thing they start with is, what is driving that decision? So as you can see in this chart, and this chart is very similar to last year, although different, wages continue to be the most talked about concern in our business. 181 of the 250 that responded said wages are my number one. Inflation moved up. It used to be down about fourth or fifth. It's now up in the second spot. And I think that's largely because, you know, flip a coin, and Peter can address this if you have specific questions. He's my in-house economist, and follows, like I do, we follow the economy pretty closely, but there's just no way to predict. I'm hearing people say next year will be better. I'm hearing people say, don't kid yourself. You know, we just don't yet know what that's going to do. So we can't let inflation be a primary driver for us. We just simply don't know. We look at the core components of what we spend money on, like wages, food costs, insurance, employee benefits, and that bottom line, utilities. And that one's important, as you'll see from the information we provide. We're seeing some pretty scary numbers related to utilities. And that's before we spend the money in years to come to try to become more energy efficient. I've talked about at meetings before something called the Washington State Clean Buildings Standard Act. That's coming. I mean, we know it's coming. We will not be exempt from it. We can't get around it, but it will be a tremendous investment for this organization. The good news is those kinds of changes ultimately lower our monthly expenses, and we need that to happen, but they require capital to fund. Millions of dollars will likely be spent in making serious changes, particularly this building. The Cove buildings, having been built in the last 10 years, are much closer to the energy standards that we would need to meet. Good question. She asked about the term market. That means some of these people, 11 of these CFOs said their rate changes are being affected by market influence, meaning that there are competitors near them that are maybe lowering prices. And so they have to take a hard look at whether or not they need to lower prices or not. We don't see any market influence here except in terms of how we set our rates. We are not the most expensive CCRC in the Seattle area, but we are one of the most expensive CCRCs in Seattle area. So, you know, we stay in tune with that, but it's not, that particular line item is not something that's high on our list of what's driving the need for our change. The need for us to change resident monthly service fees in independent living is coming from the expenses we're about to look at. And the first one of those is insurance. I think it'd be easier to leave the lid off, but let's see if I spill it. That'll be the next thing that happens. Not sure if you can see the numbers along this side of the graph, but so that's 2022. for our property, casualty, all of our commercial insurances, those things that ensure our business won't have to close because of some catastrophe, right? And if you've ever run a business or managed a business, you know that's a huge expense. In 2022, we spent about $250,000 on insurance. By the way, that insurance changes mid-year. So I'm working off of numbers from the middle of 22 to the middle of last year. We don't yet know what property and casualty will do in 24. It'll go up. We just don't know how much. And one of the interesting phenomenons is the fact that when there's a hurricane in Florida or a wildfire in California, our rates for property insurance go up. Because if you understand the concept of an insurance company, it is a shared risk, right? And all of the insurance companies are getting bombarded with claims associated with those major catastrophes. So around the country, all of us are having to essentially bear some of that burden. So year over year, from 22 to 23, we saw a 14% increase. 14% increase. It gets worse. One of the things that came about during my first year here was I was made aware that this organization was not carrying earthquake insurance on this building. Now, you may have feelings about earthquake insurance or not, but I dug into that and found out, and I've talked about this before, we belong to a little LLC, nonprofit, that is a gathering of 7 similar communities, including the Hearthstone, all from up here in Washington, all in the senior living business. Some are CCRCs, some are purely skilled nursing communities like Columbia Lutheran, and then most of those are not-for-profit. There's at least one for-profit in the group. Again, if you've ever run a business, you know that as a single business, it is terribly expensive to go buy insurance on your own. So we're a part of that group to get group pricing on our professional, commercial, casualty insurance. That's been a huge savings to be a part of that group. As I dug in, I found out that that group it was responsible for, and they have cute name called Carving Out. They carved out this building out of the coverage for earthquake insurance. The rest of them all in their little 2-story, 3-story buildings, and in Cove West and Cove East, we have earthquake insurance. We did not have it here. And I think it's pretty obvious why, because a catastrophic earthquake would just be phenomenal in terms of the expense associated with recovering from that. I made the board aware because once I found out I have culpability, so I went straight to the board and said, do you all know? They did not know that we didn't carry that insurance, and they made the decision to add it. So in July of last year, we added on our earthquake insurance. Oops, pushing the wrong button here. And I'll circle that number so you can see it. Adding the earthquake insurance caused the year over year, 2022, versus what we paid in 2023 to go up 36%. I mean, we went from paying $250,000 a year in 2022 to paying $350,000 last year. So we know that number will go up. As I said earlier, we don't know how much. The impact of the earthquake insurance in the totals only happened one time, but it'll always be there. And I want to clarify in case there's any confusion. The reason to have earthquake insurance is not just about the building. There's a shaker that we all try to plan for and be ready for, and there's damage to the building, that kind of thing. I mean, we could repair our own building. I mean, if something brings this building down, God help us all, that I don't even like to think like that'd be horrific. But as you all may know from many of you owning homes in this area, it doesn't take a lot of a shake to break things, for things to fall off the wall, for sheetrock to crack, whatever the case may be. That wasn't my concern, and ultimately was not the concern of the board. We carry something called business interruption insurance. So if something happens and we can't continue to do what we do, residents have to move out and go elsewhere, we would not have any funds to continue to try to operate without business interruption insurance. It's also called revenue protection insurance. We have that. We carry that. But because of the earthquake insurance had not been taken and we were carved out, we didn't have business interruption insurance in the event of an earthquake. So let me give you a scenario. Whole building starts rocking. We all take cover. The dust settles. We're okay. But there's a big crack in one of those columns on the first floor or second floor, wherever. The state of Washington, city of Seattle, could also come in and say, we need you to close that wing, move those residents elsewhere, close it until you can get those repairs done. Now that we have earthquake insurance, we are protected with revenue replacement insurance. So if something should happen where we're going to lose revenue because of the aftermath of an earthquake, we're protected. It's not cheap. You can see right there, it's over $50,000 on an annual basis. But we think it's worth, we know it's worth spending the money. Excuse me. I hope my voice will make it through this. So there's one other type of insurance that we are seeing significant increases, and that's our costs associated with providing health insurance, dental insurance, other types of insurance to our employees. We call it employee benefits, okay? It's not a small check we write every month, but it's a necessary part. You can't get employees to come to work here or stay here if you don't provide benefits. We saw an increase last year, something around 5 or 6%. It was nominal. And again, that insurance takes place or changes mid-year, July. So last July, we saw an increase of, I think it was 5 point something percent. Well, we're already in discussions with our underwriters for that insurance. And again, that insurance comes to us less expensively because we're a part of this pool, this Lutheran Services Northwest. So what we're hearing from them is that we could see as much as a 20% increase in our employee insurance costs. And they said it could be mid to high 20% increase. That comes from claims made and claims paid by that group of 7. Nothing we can do about it. You can't leave and go somewhere else. That history will follow you. And the idea of leaving that group of 7, you might as well double what we pay for employee insurance. So it's unfortunate. There was nothing we could do to control it or stop it, but we are likely looking at a huge increase in terms of our employee benefits. As I mentioned, the largest single, I should cough in my arm. I've been trying to teach my grandson to do that instead of in my face. But our largest single expense are wages. They make up over 50% of all that we spend every month. You add the benefits to that, you add the taxes affiliated with having employees, and that number gets up to about 65%. But the wages themselves are over 50%. So anybody follow, besides me and Peter, follow what's happening with minimum wage in Seattle? They just last week made an announcement. There's an 8-year history, and I chose that year because that's when Seattle first began to talk about getting to, anybody remember the number? We want to get minimum wage to $15 an hour. Well, they did that. They did that about 4 years ago, and the tide continues to roll. So where we are right now, and this is not an estimate, we know this to be the case, we will see a 6.85% increase in minimum wage. Now, what does that mean here? Does it mean everybody here gets an almost 7% increase in wages? Absolutely not. You have to do it toward the lower part of the spectrum of wages. So people that are near minimum wage, and we don't pay any employees minimum wage. We set our minimum wage slightly above minimum wage. I say our minimum. The minimum we would pay any new employee coming in is just slightly above minimum wage. We want to do better than what everybody else is doing. It's the only way to be competitive and to attract employees. And then people in the higher ends of that spectrum that make more money, they can't expect, nor will they see, a 7% increase. It's just not going to happen in any organization. But we will likely have to do 4, 5, maybe even 6% in some of those areas, because there's this phenomenon that happens when you raise the bottom and you don't raise the middle or the top. It's called compression, wage compression. And all of a sudden you have somebody with a more basic job in the organization making almost as much as somebody that has a more complicated a job that requires specific experience or certification or whatever the case may be. So that we knew that was coming. They were hinting about it some time ago, but Karen, our HR director, called me at home and said they just announced, and it's 6.85. So that's not good either. All these things add up over time. So got two more pieces here. Let's talk about food. And you can ask 5 people what's going to happen with food, and you'll get 5 different answers. What we did instead was we went to the USDA that, is responsible for ensuring that the foods that we consume in this country are appropriate, are handled well, and they monitor prices very, very closely. This is information that was updated yesterday. So this is not old information. Now understand that when they reference 2023, this year's not over. So they can't say an increase will be X in 2023. They talk about the trend. So food prices, they believe, are growing. The increase to the overall cost, they're growing more slowly. They also use a term called deceleration. That's good. That's good. The articles I've read say that that's because supply chain issues seem to be improving. We can't get food from here or raw materials from here or boxes or cartons, all those things. That seems to be getting a little better, and that is reflected in raw food costs. There is another potential challenge coming. Don't know if you follow this part of the news, but there's real concern that our trucking system across the U.S. is in jeopardy. At least 2 large trucking services have closed and gone bankrupt and closed. And while that business could go to others, will they be able to handle it? And there's real concern that we could see slowness associated with deliveries, that food processing manufacturers could see slowness associated with getting their raw materials. So that's really a big question mark. I love that term. This is USDA, food away from home prices. It's exactly what it says. It means not groceries, okay? Not Costco, okay? This is where you are somewhere and someone else has bought the food and provides it to you. And the reason hello, there we go. The reason they describe it that way is because, quite frankly, we can buy food cheaper than you can buy it, right? So that's why they talk about food away from home, because those that provide dining services are able to get food at a certain pricing level versus retail. So for this year, their current prediction as of November the 29th is that we would see a 7.1% increase in our food costs. We will have seen throughout the course of 12 months, 7.1. That's nationally. And again, things are more expensive on the West Coast and in Seattle. But when they talk about next year, this is where they use that term deceleration. They think the increase in food costs will slow, so not going up as fast, but what I highlighted for you to see is they will not decline in 2024. So we know we're going to see at least a 7.1% increase next year over this year. So let's talk about utilities. These are scary numbers. And I know this because I sign those checks every month. And this is all utilities. So power, electrical power, gas, our drawing a total blank. Thank you very much. Water, sewer, and there's some other, There are some other components of utilities, cable, that kind of thing. So this is all combined. But this will show you what we spend. So 5 years ago, in 2019, we were spending, and if you can't see that number, yes, it's $500,000. We were spending $500,000 a year on utilities. If you look at 2023, Peter's done the math. We have 10 months worth of historical information, and we can make projections for November and December. So we think we'll end this year closer to $750,000. Now, anybody do that math? From 500 to 750, that's a 50% increase over 5 years, which would be an average of 10%. Again, that's running higher than what any rates we're doing for residents here in the community, with the exception of last year. Last year is the first time in recent history, in terms of the historical information that we could find, last year was the first time any residents got 10% increases. Again, I stand corrected if you got one 4 years ago or 5 years ago, but we did a spot check and we couldn't see evidence where anybody had gotten that much of an increase. So the reason we did 5%, 7.5%, and 10% is so we could average 7.5%. That's an important number. So yeah, and then the last piece of that is between 22 and 23, we saw a 16.6% increase in our utility costs. And Peter was telling me about either an article or a news piece.
Yeah.
What was the number?
10%
For
Seattle City Light guaranteed 10% for electric costs.
yeah, so I got to repeat that because they won't be able to hear it from you, and that's okay. You have a mic, by the way. But yeah, what he just said was Seattle Light, that's our power company, made an announcement just yesterday or day before that their customers will see a 10% increase this year, and that's guaranteed. Now, they can always do more than that, but they've already gone on record as saying 10%. Well, yeah, that's better than last year of 16.6, but remember that power is only a portion of this total of the $750,000. All those other utilities are factors as well. All right, before I wrap up, I'm going to take one more swallow of water. Okay. So, there you have it. Our costs are going up sometimes at double-digit rates, and we know we have to bear those costs. We are working and will continue to work hard to reduce our costs wherever possible without it impacting you. But the reality is we are feeling a crunch as an organization. So the other thing we looked at from Ziegler, same company, was the predictions of what communities like ours, it's 250 CFOs, what they think they're going to be doing next year. It's a great reference for us to know if we are just way out of line or, whether we're not where we need to be. I want to remind you, the numbers I'm going to show you are nationally. So if there's a CCRC in Mississippi, no offense to anyone from Mississippi, but guarantee you it's significantly less expensive to live there than it is here. And why? Because their labor is a lot less expensive. States like that, organizations that operate in states like that, when they say minimum wage, they're talking about the federal minimum wage. The last time I checked, what's that number? Is it still 7 something? Yeah. I believe last time I looked, that is a third of what we pay our lowest paid employees. We're closer to 21.7. Do the math. Okay, so I want to caution you that don't seek to find a particular number in this next slide, but I want to explain some things to you. So first of all, this column for 2023, those are actual numbers. Last year, when I showed you a similar slide, those numbers were projection. And here's what's important. That number right there, 6.24 as an average amount of increase, this chart predicted 5.3. So somewhere between September, when all these CFOs said, well, here's what we're going to do, and the time those rates went into effect, January the 1st, there was a significant growth from 5.3 to 6.24. The other thing you need to recognize is we're on the West Coast, we're in Seattle. So when you look at a national study, you just assume we are in the fourth upper quartile, okay? So as rates are spread across the whole from lowest to highest, we're in that top fourth. And unfortunately, Ziegler doesn't print that. But what they do give us are a couple of key factors here. The median is 5%. That's predicted. Will it be 5, or when those CFOs all get done making rate increases, will that number be close to 6? When you look across that line, notice anything along in here? The average rate increase for many years in our industry was 3%. That worked. Organizations like this, we made that work, right? Unfortunately, once COVID hit, once wages began to spike, we saw much higher increase coming our way. So the predictions of a 5% average, I'll make a prediction that won't hold. I think when we see those actual numbers next year, it will be higher than that. Maybe it'll be 5.5, maybe it'll be 6, but I just want you to have that as a reference. Also, that's average. So if you look at the low, which apparently somebody is going to reduce their rates by 1%, not sure why that is, but to a high of 12%, you can divide 12 by 4, and you can sort of figure out where the fourth quartile is going to be, right? So I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. So in conclusion, what you came to hear only took me 45 minutes to tell you. As I mentioned, we are wrapping up the process of our budgets for next year. Jack is back in town next week, and now that we have Peter, I expect that process to go pretty quickly and smoothly. We'll make a presentation to our board sometime in December. We do that online. They don't meet in December. They meet again in January. But we will send our budget to them for their review. We actually have an audit and budget committee, subcommittee of our board led by I'm going to blank on her last name, Terry Higbee. Terry is a local CPA. She's been on the board for almost 12 years because her term ends in February. And our board is a total of 4 3-year terms, maximum. So we're working. We're going to try to figure out where we can cut expenses, where we can save, and how we can do that without you feeling it. And you got to trust me, I've been in the industry almost 30 years. That is one of the most difficult things any manager, director, CEO has ever had to do. It's like, how do I conserve and save without it impacting the services that you enjoy? So, in their November meeting, our board voted unanimously to support a 7.5% increase for all independent living residents. If you think about it this way, it is essentially what we did last year. We targeted, by doing 5, 7.5, and 10, we targeted an average of 7.5. The increase actually came in a little less than that because we didn't divide the group into perfect thirds, and that tended to push down that average a little. It was above 7 last year. So on average, residents of the Hearthstone paid a little over 7% last year. This year, going into 2024, will be 7.5. So you'll get a letter tomorrow with this information in there. I'll go ahead and tell you that we did not put your current rate in there. If you don't know what you're paying, if you don't see your invoices or look at them, that's why I brought Peter, so you can know him, recognize his face, his office. If you go past our package room on the hallway going down where Hallie and Jill and Ariana and I and Rosie are, as you go down, there's a little hallway to the left. It's where our copier room is. His office is at the end of that hallway. I want to be sure everybody can find Peter. So, but if the letter that shows your new rate which should be, and I emphasize the word should, based on our information we have in our system and, including a calculation to increase it 7.5%, you will see that new rate. There's no particular reason except it just gets convoluted. We didn't give you your old rate. We assume you know your old rate. So if you do a little quick math and go, that doesn't sound like 7.5%, he's your guy. Call him, go through it. Before anybody asks, yes, we are increasing second occupant fees. We're doing the same level of increase, 7.5%. And I'll tell you why. It's easy. A second occupant fee mostly pays for food. Anybody remember seeing what food's going to do to us? Over 7%. So we couldn't hold those second occupant fees where they were. It is a part of rent for two people versus one person. All right. Once again, our theme. We want to work together with you to ensure that the Hearthstone is here for many years to come. And this is the way, at least for 2024, that we have to operate. I don't expect any of you to like it. I wouldn't like it. My landlord called me and increased my rate 7.5%, but I probably have to endure it. And I hope many of you can do that with a smile and say, I understand, I accept the fact that with expenses going up, it is much, much more expensive to operate the Hearthstone today than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even last year. It's more expensive. So that wraps it up. Hallie, if you will turn on the house lights. I'm going to ask you, thank you, Pam. You're doing exactly what I'm about to say. Go ahead and turn all three on. So if you have a question, it's important that you raise your hand. I have the best visible point to select someone, and then please wait until you're handed a microphone. Hallie, after you prop open the door, we need to get the doors open. There are folks that are leaving. And so she'll bring you a mic. So hang on, Pam. But Stephen's standing by here. I got a question in the back. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned a utilities increase, and I'm wondering if you can break that down into natural gas, electricity, and whatever. Natural gas, electricity, and garbage collection.
Oh, yeah, that's another utility. Thank you for adding that. I can get you that information. I don't have that available today, but again, Peter loves to build spreadsheets and charts, so he can get that and we'll distribute it. You had a second question.
Part B, my electricity bills at the house I just sold were negligible. It was basically a grid fee. There's a lot of roof space here that could be used to lower your electricity bills.
Roof? Did you say roof?
Roof space.
Yeah, we're not able to put anything on the roof of our buildings.
Can't put solar panels on a roof.
Not this building because the age of it. I guess technically you could do that at Coves, and it is something I'm willing for us to take a look at. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's a good idea, but this building is you just don't really mess with anything that's never been changed because it's just so old, and that causing somebody to inspect, and then when they come and inspect, they find 10 other things. So great idea. But she was asking about having a graph. Hallie, will you come forward with the mic? It's Pam on the front door. I mean, that I will get you that information, that breakdown. It was just a little bit too much data for this meeting. So, okay, thank you, Pam.
Pam Hazelton. I have some great concerns. I have been in this business for a long time. I did what both of you do a long time ago. But what we have here now are a lot of residents that I've spoken with who are really at the top level of their endurance of spending any more money. Do we have any way of helping the people who are totally topped out, Reggie?
Thank you for mentioning that. I meant to include it in our discussion. Absolutely, we do. It's called our Resident Assistance Program. It's been in place since almost the inception of the Hearthstone. And essentially is when a resident has reached a point where they have difficulty, affording their monthly payment, that they make application to our committee. We have a resident assistance program committee that includes Rosie, myself, our chaplain, and Jack McKittrick. So we recently got an application, and we will take a look at that, and hopefully we'll be able to help that person. But when I speak to other groups, I tell folks all the time, to my knowledge, and through the records I can find of our operation, as well as the minutes from all the board meetings throughout the years, the Hearthstone has never asked a resident to leave if they could not afford to pay their rent. So congratulations, you moved into a really great place. Now, am I going to guarantee you that's going to last for the next 10, 20, or 30 years? I don't know. I can't see that far. But today, we have a program. We have all the documentation together, and we are happy to provide it to anybody. So anybody that's telling you that should make application. He's probably the first person, he or Hallie, to contact about getting the documentation. I want to add one thing to that. Yes, there are some guidelines in that program. And the first is you can't come to us and say, I can't pay my rent, and records would show that you just gave $50,000 to your cousin or your son or grandson or whatever. In our resident handbook, which, by the way, we are nearing the end of revising, and you'll see a copy. We had targeted January, but with that most recent COVID outbreak and the changes that affected us, it might be February. But we are coming out with a new resident handbook. It's the same handbook for every resident throughout the community. But in there, it talks about the resident assistance program, and there is this caveat that says you have to be a good steward of your assets as well. And so if you have concern about divesting or giving or sharing or loaning money, your personal assets, and you think that could affect your ability to be a part of the resident assistance program, I highly encourage you to talk to us before you make those kinds of decisions. It might not matter. You might have as much money as Jeff Bezos, and it just doesn't matter. But if you're looking out 5, 10, 15, 20 years and thinking about your expenses and what they might be, I think it's important as you plan, and I'm sure many of you have financial advisors, make sure they understand that, listen, the things I do in the present could affect my ability to qualify to participate in that program in the future. It's just smart to think that way. Okay, I got one. You got somebody waiting? Okay, sorry, I'll come right back to you. Hallie, if you want to come to this side.
I'm Joanne London, 716. I have a curiosity question in terms of we have a buy-in to come to this place, and I'm wondering how that has changed over the time, and is that money is it earning interest, or is it paying for our new coves and stuff?
Yeah, so the answer to that question is yes, and on both counts. Entrance fees that are paid by residents, that have been paid by residents for years and years, first and foremost, have significant restrictions on them. First and foremost of those is the refundability of that fee. Some of you that came into the coves in the early days of Cove West may have been fortunate enough to pay a little more and get a 90% refundable entrance fee. Well, guess what? We can't use any of that 90%. Because we have to be prepared at all times to repay that. To the second part of your question is kind of what does that money go for? We use that primarily for capital improvements. Right? So, if you ask, if we built another cove somewhere, if we had reserves, and that's a key word in this equation, not just do we have money in the bank, do we have reserves that could pay a portion of plus financing to be able to build another building. There are no plans right now to expand the Hearthstone. I figured out within a couple of weeks of getting here, we don't have our house in order to even think like that. And honestly, adding another property or buying another property in the early days won't make you any money. It's a long return. But those funds that we hold for refundability related to entrance fees, those do earn. We actually have those in a very, as our broker would say, a very diverse and reasonably safe portfolio. How'd all of you make out back in January and February? Because we took a beating, because that's what happens in the stock market. But it's coming back, and we have elected to liquidate some of that, just, because it was time to do that. And we have a great broker. We've had we work with Morgan Stanley, a guy named Jeff. It's not Jeff. LeClaire. Great. Sorry. Y'all ever have a problem where you can't remember somebody's name?
What is the approximate interest you can earn or have been earning?
I don't have that information. I could try to get it to you, but if I tell you today, it'll be different tomorrow. But we do as well as, shouldn't say it that way. We do as well as anybody else in the stock market with a reasonably conservative portfolio. Yeah, you can put money in stocks. You can buy stocks yourself or bonds or whatever you want. It's up to your risk tolerance. And I'm happy to say the risk tolerance at the Hearthstone is fairly low. We can't afford to put our money in things that might give us a dividend or a return of 10 or 15%. That's not safe. It's not smart. Again, because we have to hold all of that refundability. And that includes a new resident. If you just moved in 1 year ago, on our 4-year amortization, we have to hold 3 more years of that. So this is all calculated in a huge spreadsheet that makes me glassy-eyed. But guys like Frank McKittrick and now Peter understand how we have to manage the risk associated. But that amount of money that's held for refundability is only applicable if all of you suddenly decided to move out. I will also tell you that there are caveats in that entrance fee that say if you move out, if you give us notice, we have some period of time after you leave and take all of your items, we have some period of time to refurbish that unit and put it back on the market. And then the next person is paying an interest fee, quite frankly, that helps cover your refund. That's just how CCRCs work. But that money is not used in the day-to-day operations. That's not what that's for. Okay. I got one on the front. Okay. Be right back to you, Meg.
Yes. I take exception and have some serious concerns about your use of comparables to determine the market valuation and rate increase. I'm familiar with some of the facilities that you've used for your market comparables, and I visit some of the other communities in Seattle, and we are substandard in terms of food, activities, and facilities, maintenance. What other facilities often have one of their significant elevators out of service? Heating and air
Horizon
conditioning.
House to start with, yeah. They have the same problem we have.
Heating and air conditioning, even in the new buildings, problems with that for extended periods in the last year. And I understand that staff turnover is an issue in this industry, but I believe that the staff turnover rate in this facility is higher than average,
That number is in the 30% range on an annual
which
basis.
affects all of us.
Right, but you need to understand, though, not to argue with you, but in this industry, Peter just came out of Merrill. What was their turnover rate? You remember?
Yeah, they were looking at close to 80% turnover.
Close to
rate.
80% turnover a year. We're in the 30% range. So I defend that. I think we do a great job of retaining the 180 plus employees that we have here. So, but go ahead with your question.
Anyway, it really concerns me to see the monthly rate increase when I don't feel we receive comparable services for those to the communities that you're basing this increase on.
So first of all, I made it very clear in the beginning, we are not basing this increase on any comparison to others in the market. We did that last year. And I had a presentation that's available on our YouTube channel that we looked at what others are charging, and we brought our rates up to meet those. This community, when I got here, was way underpriced. I can't begin to tell you how far this community was underpriced, which is why we have the circumstances we have today, where we're trying to play catch up. So I want to make it clear, the 7.5% was because of all these numbers you just saw. And I can go back through it again if you want, but most of them were double digits. And all of them were more than 7%. So it's hard not to defend 7.5% as an increase. I get it. I totally understand. And the concerns you may have about services, please express those to us. I recommend going through your resident council. They have a direct line to me. And if you really want to get involved, serve as a floor chair. Those elections are coming up in the spring. Be involved. Meet with your floor or your building and talk about your concerns. Bring those to the resident council. We have tremendous resident council leadership, and we talk about resolving those issues like you mentioned. I'll take a straw poll. If you lived here 1 year ago, if you've moved in the last year, don't vote. If you lived here 1 year ago and you believe that our dining services and food program are better today than they were a year ago, would you raise your hand? Okay. So thank you very much. I know that's not everyone, and I'm not trying to stack the deck against you. I'm just saying that the surveys we're getting, by the way, the survey results, that's a long story. We had to reopen the survey because some people missed the deadline, and they shortened the deadline by 1 day. So anybody that was waiting the last day didn't make it. So we had to reopen it. It's taken a few days to do that. Hallie, when do you think we'll be done? Okay. So, yeah, if you didn't hear her, it's going to reopen at some point next week for a couple of days. If you've done a survey, it doesn't affect you. We know who hasn't turned in their surveys. We want to hear from every single resident. So you'll be notified. And I will tell you, most of the folks that weren't able to respond are in assisted living. They don't really have cell phones and computers and tablets. And so it was difficult to get them on the phone with a representative of our survey company. So Hallie and others are going to do that firsthand. So yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Hallie. Reggie, I would like to express my appreciation to you for this outstanding presentation that was so organized. So even for someone that has the limited financial experience I do, understandable. I would also like to ask that living in Cove West, that I don't have complaints. I love the food. I love the service. I love now that we have all these activities that we can take part in. And so I want to thank you and the other members of the Hearthstone.
Hey, thank you so much. That really... That helps me get up and come to work every morning at 6 o'clock. Okay, we've expanded an hour here. Anything else? I will tell you that you can email me. You can stop by my office. You will have to get through Hallie. That's our deal. And if I can't see you, she'll figure out a time, or I'll call you back. Peter is also a great resource for some of these specific questions about, the various amounts that we spend. We're an open book. We're happy to share with you. I can't give you wage information, but I can tell you how much a payroll costs, because we're funding one, or funded one yesterday that goes out tonight. We pay every 2 weeks. What's that number? Yes, okay.
Okay, sure. Yeah, 300,000 1 week. So
Yeah, $300,000. So twice a month, that's $600,000 that we pay to our employees. That we do that because we need our employees. You need our employees, and it is what we spend. But this is not an inexpensive place to operate, and I don't believe I've done much to increase that. I heard somebody make the argument like, why'd we buy a Tesla? To save money. We will save money in a year, almost enough to pay what we spent on, in addition to the trade-in we have. But a Tesla is less expensive to operate. They're more efficient. Excuse me. They have all kinds of, positive benefits, like you don't wear out brakes because you just let off the accelerator and that electric motor slows you down. So that's not an expense. When we spend large amounts like that, that's not an expense. That's a capital that goes back to the question about interest fees. So I'm getting the hook to pull off stage. So thank you all for being here. I look forward to seeing you soon.